Hello, my name is Scott Davis, and I am the course captain for 1420 at ACC, Ripple Community College, and I am doing this video for myself and Patricia Anderson, who is the course captain for 1440 Pre-Calc. I teach both, but I have the Master Online for copying for Trig, which is extremely similar to the 1440. We start off with the same stuff. We both do Trig. Well, Pre-Calc, we start off with Trig, and at the very end, we have an additional unit of algebra for our Pre-Calc. So what I go through on this is going to look exceptionally similar to what the layout is and the feel and everything for 1440. So let me kind of go through. Here's what we have. So this is our online 1420 at ACC. And the big thing is kind of every week we have a weekly announcement of here's what we have going on, and here are some links to stuff that you're going to need for this week. I don't teach it this semester, so I pushed the dates forward, but I didn't kind of adjust all the individual things. So this is what I had from last semester. But basically this, we would create a new calendar, and then these due dates would all line up. And so each week we'd have to just adjust whatever the weekly due dates, which really their Monday goes to a Monday of this semester versus Monday from last semester. So pretty straightforward, pretty easy of just kind of tweaking a little bit of due dates. But each unit has this much information, right? And so you can see that unit 1 had the similar kind of a feel, similar look. We had weeks that went by. Here's a description of what's going on for week 3. You even have a bad math joke in there. Things are highlighted of what things were due and when they were. They opened up on this day and they're due on this day, and whatever the situation is. So here we go again. We had something typically quizzes. This is our online quiz. Our quizzes, our homework, and our tests are all done through Delta Math, which I'll go through here in a bit. But then there's some additional work, which is really just detective work per unit, and I'll go through what that is. So most of the stuff that we do is through Delta Math, and there's a little bit of sprinkling of stuff that we do in D2L. But all the resources or the notes, the reviews are all going to be in D2L and kind of these announcements. And so, so if you go through it, this unit 1 would be ending, unit 2 starts to begin. And so we have these links, and these are just links for the students that goes right to their content. So they don't have to go into content and figure out what my thought process was on it. Everything they need should have a link associated to it, so they don't have to go and find it. It's just all right there. So as unit 2, so unit 3 is not up because they're not in unit 3. So everything just kind of opens up right around the right time according to the calendar. That timing on stuff probably needs to be tweaked a little bit because there's spring break on one semester and not spring break on another semester. But in general, all real close to each other. So within every unit, there is a blank note, guided notes that if you're in face-to-face or face-to-face class, here are your guided notes. We have section 2.01, 2.02, and it just kind of goes through the semester or goes through that unit. And so all the unit notes are right here, 2.02, and on and on and on. And then with those, for the teachers, and for the students, there's a filled out version of that as well. And so you can see that right here, that these are all PDFs on the links. So that way it prints out nicely, it looks good. And then there's a Word version of it that I'll show you in it as well. But here's kind of our notes that go with everything filled out. Students find that helpful as well, just to kind of see it done a little bit different sometimes. And then all these videos, these are all videos for all of those guided notes. So 2.01, 2.02, 2.03. So this is kind of that first section. There isn't a 2.05 because a 2.05 is a quiz. And you'll see how that kind of lines up and organizes very nicely on our homework platform, Delta Math. And then 2.06 on to 2.09. So kind of like a different unit within each of the units. So within this are videos for everything. So if you click on this, it's going to go right to a YouTube video that is just going through the notes. And it's broken up into individual videos, so that way it's not one giant long lecture. And if a student needs help specifically on converting from degrees to radians, degrees, they're not going to have to watch all the other stuff and try to fast forward or figure it out. And at some point, some students are going to give up on that, which we don't want. And so they're all broken up into 5 to 10 minute videos Also, that just is a nicer time to sit and go through things, right? I don't want to sit through an hour and a half long video on one lesson. So if they don't want to go to D2L, we have them all kind of organized in a PDF as well. And so these are all the videos with timestamps kind of on them, so they know what kind of commitment they are. Is this a 10-minute video? Is this a 3-minute video? It's just kind of nice to let them know here's what you're about to put your time into. So those are all there for every single unit. So we have guided notes, we got filled out notes, we have videos for those notes, and then there's a review, a handwritten review for every one of the units with answers at the end down here. So these are all the answers that go with them, along with the other link, which is also worked. The problems are worked out. So they can kind of see, here is somebody's take on how they went about doing this, right? So some students find that useful to look at somebody else's work and kind of helps guide them into how they want to approach something. So every unit has that amount of information, right? It all just kind of pops up as you go through it. Every week we have an announcement, and we have here the timing, here are things. And so here are things that are due this week, and these are things that are due kind of the following week. So there's information on both of here's what's happening now, and here's what's happening in the very near future. And every week, whatever was happening in the near future is now happening this week. And then kind of here's what's happening in the future, along with the bad math joke. And so all that happens throughout the whole semester. All the announcements are all set up to go. I think, yep. Okay, so week 3, and then week 4 is kind of where we're at, all set up with the time. That's all adjustable. And then unit 2. So once we're done with unit 1, now we're just focusing on unit 2. So not putting the review thing on here yet because they're not quite there yet. But once the unit test starts to get closer and closer, you'll see additional links kind of added in there. Right, so kind of timing thing. And then obviously unit 2 is finishing, so unit 3 opens up. And so these are all there. And then towards the end, which is kind of nice that it's kind of counting down here a little bit too. You're on this week of this week. One of the units has a formula sheet because they're the trig identities. And so that formula sheet's there. They don't have to go find it. It's right there in the notes. And then once we get close to it, when you get close to the final, there is an Excel file that you can click on and open up, and it's basically what their grade is, and they'll populate the information. They can download this. It doesn't work in here. You have to actually download it, and they can put in their information and just kind of like, here's where I'm at. They'll know they'll fill in these pieces of information, and it'll adjust their overall grade, assuming that these are the kind of percentages, but they're all, it's just an Excel formula that you could just if somebody was tweaking to kind of make theirs a little bit different. And then that way the students don't have to reach out and say, what do I need in order to get this? They can figure it out on their own. And it's just populating the information on an Excel file. So those announcements pop up every week, and it kind of just guides them through, and it's going to connect to, sorry, let me get to the very, very first one. We have a greeting, a welcome to the class, kind of a introduction right here. Nope, sorry, right here. And then, so a math tutorial. This is the Delta Math tutorial. It's actually done by Delta Math, kind of walking through, here's what your course is going to look like. Here's what the, you from a student perspective, here's what the homework looks like. Here's how you go through things. Here's a link to the video syllabus, the link to the calendar, which are all the dates for the teachers that you're going to want. And then that's the link that's all it takes to get them going in Delta Math. It's free for students. The cost is on the teacher, and the teacher has a $95 cost per year, but you can teach as many classes as you want out of that. The amount of resources that comes with this for $95 is pretty impressive. And I'll show that here in a little bit. But that's it. So part of the announcement is they just click on this, they log in, they're ready to go. Right? There's no cost for them. There's no waiting for any kind of reimbursement, any kind of financial aid or anything, just ready to go. So, and then all the teacher stuff is also, so like all the links are for the students, and then all that information is also inside your content, right? And so if you're on unit 2, that stuff that we were looking at, these are the notes. This is the PDF version of those notes. And then these are the filled out of those. So those two are the ones that are linked. And then this one is a Word document. So that way, if somebody wants to adjust it, they have the Word document for it, teacher-wise. Most of them are kind of hidden just because we don't want not that the students can't open it up, but sometimes when they do open it up and they print it, there's just something that weird happens sometimes with the printing of it. So to avoid that, we make a PDF version of it. And then those videos, that PDF for the videos, so if people do adjust the videos, make their own or whatever it is, then those videos are there. And then here's the review. Those links are already on the announcements, but those are the actual documents within it. And then if you want to do a written test, here's an example of a written test that we've used in the past. And it's hidden just in general as for the students. And every unit has that exact same look, exact same feel, where it's notes, review, and test. And it's notes, review, and test. And then you have your syllabus and information up above. And so some of these things, like, we're going to link the PDF version of it, but this is the syllabus. That is what's creating the PDF. And then same thing, here's the calendar. And then this is the one that's linked on the announcement. All right. And then the textbook that we use is an OER textbook, totally free. I downloaded the PDF of it. And so the students can just click on that and they have access to that. And then when you looked at the titles on things, so let me go to one of the notes. So on the titles for the notes, so for our timing, it's this, but that number corresponds to the textbook number. Right, we just grabbed a pre-calc book, so that way we had college algebra, trig, and pre-calc all in one book, and so we're using the OpenStax pre-calc OER material, and so this is just for our own kind of timing, and this is the textbook kind of correlation to it. Okay, other things within the D2L is other than resources and notes and videos and stuff like that for the students, there are discussions, but not in the normal sense. There is your basic kind of introduction, tell me about yourself a little bit, and then respond to 2 people. And then you have a screenshot editor, because that's what you're going to be using for this detective work stuff down here. So screenshot is make sure that you can kind of use the equation editor within Delta Math and do square roots and pi and stuff like that you're going to need for your explanations for trig. So then here's really the discussion stuff is per unit, every unit has these 2 detective works. The detective work is, this is a problem that has been done incorrectly. And so that problem for the students, they need to look at somebody else's work, figure out what they did wrong, describe it, and then fix it. Explain what they should have done correctly and what are the correct final answers to it. And I think that that is hugely invaluable, is looking at somebody's work and figuring out what went wrong. Finding mistakes, right? We're all going to make mistakes. And so we tried to come up with problems that, here's what students have a tendency to make mistakes on. So if you click on this, you can kind of see that here's the picture. And then the description was they were given a cosine and they told you the sine was negative, cosine was positive. So it should have been in the 4th quadrant and they drew it in the 1st quadrant. So really all the math and all of that, I believe, is correct, except for you should have some negatives on things because they drew things in the wrong quadrant. So the students would put that information in, fix it, give me the correct answers. And then other students would have access to it, once they did it. And especially for those students that were not comfortable with theirs, they really weren't sure what was wrong with the problem, which is going to happen. They could see what other people did. Even after their submission, they could go back and kind of add their own, like, oh, I see, looking off of somebody else's, that this is what was wrong with the problem, and here's how I would fix it. So that, I think, is a huge learning piece. And so like each unit has it. So like this one is an angle of elevation, except they drew the 19 degrees in the wrong corner. So they should have drew it up here or down here. And then so they're going to get the wrong answer based on that. And that happens all the time, right? And so if you don't get an example or you don't get exposure to what went wrong, then you're going to continue to make that same mistake. So just something for them to think about. So every unit has that. So that's, messing with periods and revolutions and all sorts of different things. So each unit has detective work that they're going to do. So the majority of stuff is going to come from Delta Math, but a little bit of it is going to come from, this is our version of discussions. So, and then we don't have any quizzes in here because it's all in Delta Math. Grades are already set up. According to, they're all done by percentages. And so this chunk of stuff, here's your detective work and all of that. And then there's the quizzes from Delta Math. tests from Delta Math. There's a final in there, and then there's just kind of this overall ongoing average from Delta Math. That is kind of, I'll just grab all the homeworks and kind of average it all on. It's very quick and easy to do in Delta Math. So that's the D2L side, and kind of everything within it, all the resources and all the material and stuff like that. And then the meat of it is really in Delta Math. So if I click on Delta Math, here's a rough idea of what this looks like. Very first thing you see is when you log into it, it looks like this. And this is all the material that exists that you instantly have access to in Delta Math. And so they're graded, they're kind of set up by grade level. So this is 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. So some of the trig stuff that we use is going to come from Algebra 2, and some of it's going to come from pre-calc. And they're all kind of specifically set up. These are all the different kinds of problems within it, right? So there's lots and lots and lots of material that we used in order to create our classes. So as we go through it, let me jump back to the top. And here's what it looks like once I create a class. So to create a class, I would go to Tools, Manage your Students, and I would add a class. And these are the classes that I have set up. And these are the 2 that I'm actually teaching from. Otherwise, I kind of house the masters. And so I would create a new class. Once I create a new class, it's going to give me a link. And that link is what I put in my announcement, my introduction kind of announcement, my week 1 kind of a thing, that students click on that, takes them right to Delta Math, and they can sign up for the class right then and there. And then teacher side of it is, once I have all my classes set up, I can copy from the master or copy from my own. To copy, I would just be clicking on this. And right now, these are the people that I have access to. And so my number is that. And so if somebody was copying from me, they would say, add a new teacher, and they would put in that one number. And then instantly they would have access to all of my material, right? So whatever I have, and I can continuously archive things. So as you know, like I have classes from other semesters that they'll pop up here because they're done. And so I can archive those classes. And so they don't sit out there. And so it's not overwhelming for everybody, including myself. So if I focus on just my trig stuff, this is just specifically in my unit 2. But there is, I can have all of it. And I haven't opened up unit 3. I haven't copied over unit 3 because we're not there yet. And so I'll kind of do that as I go. I can filter through into my individual units. I can look at assignments, which are just homework. I can filter out any kind of a test, which are our quizzes, right? What you don't see on this, because this is my face-to-face, is the unit 2 test. Well, that exists as well. So in our master, it exists. I just want to do the other one because you can see what it looks like from the teacher side when you have students. This one's not going to have students. And so every unit has a test. Now all the reviews, I don't have the reviews because the reviews are in Delta or in D2L because they're written. I want students to actually write it on paper for their review, do math on paper. But the tests and our quizzes and our homework is all there. And then, so let me show you what it looks like with students, right? So these are all the different assignments. If you click on this is not going to take you to the actual assignment. What it's going to take you to is data. And this is my class. These are all the students in here. And we just started it. So some students have kind of chugged along a little bit and some haven't. But I can get a rough idea of how much how much time people have spent on this individual section. There is video resources that Delta Math has created. That's something that we don't have to do. It's already there. But those other videos were specifically for those notes. And then these videos are specifically for those problems. And I can kind of adjust student scores. I can change student scores if they're like, oh, I got this right. I can look back at problems and I'll show all of that. But that's one way to kind of start to look at some data. Another way is if I look at the grade table, this is what it looks like for the teacher side of here's where you're going to spend most of your time of kind of pulling in information. So here are all the scores. And the cool thing about this is that I can filter back through and go, all right, I'm just looking at assignments. And let me go back to unit 1. Oops. So unit 1. So this is unit 1's homework. And if I go back to my students, it filtered out any kind of tests or anything. And this is the average for that person, right? And so this person, who's me, is kind of pulling down. These are the individual averages for those homeworks, right? So like 91% Students got 91% on average. Well, mine is pulling that down. But I can individually look at all these different things, and I can look at actual, here's how many people were watching videos and how much time was spent. And I can look and see a lot of different data when they last did stuff. I can, let's go back. If I want to look at an individual student, so let's say I'm going to go back to Unit 2, and doesn't matter if I see everything. If I go to the grade, again, I get all sorts of information. In this order to this, I can adjust if you wanted it to go a different direction. If you click on this, this is kind of the order that you can have things. It's totally up to you. It's how you see it. So if you wanted to tweak all that stuff, it is all tweakable. But like, let's say if I look at this individual thing. So if I want to click at Mark specifically, you know, Mark spent, he watched some videos. So it's like, okay, well, let me dig in this a little bit deeper. So he spent 21 minutes on the homework. That's great. But let's look at Mark's actual problems. So if I go to his 2.01 and I expand it, I can see that he was required to do 3 problems correctly. Now that may have taken him 4 times, right? Because this actually is 4 different problems. So they finally got their 3 out of 3. They watched some videos to kind of help their cause along the way. I can look at individual problems, like here's the correct answer. Here's what he did. And this is set up that you can try it 3 times. And on the 3rd try, if you get it wrong, it's going to spit out a new problem for you. And that's why this 3 out of 3, right? So he got it wrong, and then it spit on a new problem for him. And at some point, he has to get 3 correct. And that may take 4 or 5 times to get those 3, but to get full credit for it, you got to do 3 correctly. And so he didn't have a struggle on those. It took him 2 times to get that. And so we can, again, click on it and see what did he seem to do wrong. Here's what his answer was. Here's what the correct answer should have been. And every one of these always has this kind of explanation or picture or visual or tutorial or something that when they answer it, they're going to see that whether they want to or not. And that's up to them to kind of take advantage of that information or not. But that's what it looks like. Kind of if you really want to dig into the data, or if you want to adjust some scores, you can always click on things and cancel. That way, especially like online quizzes and tests, you know, they're like, hey, they'll reach out and say, hey, I put this and can you give me a little bit of extra credit? I rounded wrong or whatever it is. So then you can actually look at it very quickly, very easily and adjust it, right? And so you're like, yep, I'll give you full credit on that. So, but that opportunity is there on every single student to kind of dig in deeper into individual students. Or you can just look as a class, right? And so, so as far as the actual assignment, here are the dates on it. So let me go to how do you edit all of that stuff. So if you click on edit, these are the titles. So those goes with the notes. Remember, those go with the book. This is selecting what the class is. So when I'm setting this up, I'm selecting the appropriate class for that assignment. I don't have to post it right away. I could put a date on there if I would like to. Quizzes, I put dates on them because they'll open and close because I get everything kind of set up at the beginning of each unit. I click on the unit that it's going to correspond to. It's homework, so there's no time limit. And then there's a due date. And then if you want to do any kind of a penalty on it, so I do 5 days for 75% credit, and then the end of the semester for half the credit. Skills. So these are the actual problems. And so if you click on this little sign right here, this little directional sign, this is how many problems per thing, right? And so when I go down to that last one, there was 1 required on that and 1 required on that. Now, there's no penalty, which means if they get something wrong, there's nothing taken against them. They just have to get 3 problems right. Again, that may take them 5 or 6 times, but they need to get 3 to get full credit for it. And then if you notice, when I open up some of these, there are categories within it. So Delta Math allows you, like, certain problems are like, well, there's a generalization on these types of problems, but we want some problems given with pies and some problems maybe given without pies. And so you can kick out certain problems, a certain style of problems that you don't want, or you can focus on certain ones that you do. And not all problems have that, right? If you clicked on those first couple ones, they didn't, but some do. And so as you create problems, like, well, we weren't focusing on those, we were just focusing on those. And so maybe the next problem is focusing on other ones. And so all sorts of different kind of things that you can do within this Delta Math. And so all those types of problems are down here. And so when you click on them, you'll see whether those types of things exist or whether they don't exist. Big thing that I think differentiates this is when you do go through there, there's so many resources that exist. So if you go on here and a student is on a problem that the student side, we don't see it quite right now, but when you log in as a student, you're going to see two things that I think are amazingly invaluable for them. Is Delta Math has this little link up here. I think it'd be right here when you log in as a student, and it's a show an example. And it just shows them, basically it shows them this look right here, right? And so it'll show this a different problem, but it'll go through all the steps on how to go about solving it. And there may be different methods on how you solve it. Some of them are interactive, and it all just kind of depends. But another huge thing is every single one of these problems was going to have a help video that you can click, and it's done by Delta Math people, and it's all pretty consistent, and it looks just like this. And it's somebody walking through how to do this certain type of problem, which is what you saw with all that, like the video, where some students are taking advantage of it, some students don't need to, and that's okay. But everything created by Delta Math has that. Not every problem in trig and pre-calc did Delta Math have, but I'd say they had at least 90% of what we were looking for. And so there were certain type of word problems that were like, no, we would really like this type of word problem. And so we created them. So creating them doesn't have those bells and whistles, but they're kind of mixed in there, and I'll show you what that looks like. But one of the biggest things that it has, like every platform kind of has just your basic problems, right? Like solve this or convert this or whatever it is. What I think stands out with Delta Math is graphing is one of the biggest ones. And so when you're graphing, you're actually going to graph. And so what I did was, so the very first one that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to start graphing and drawing these pictures, is you can embed a video like this one was like, how do you actually do this? Like to set it up correctly. Not so much this one, but there are, when you graph, a sine curve, you put your 5 points on there. On Delta Math, you're not going to pick a multiple choice and figure out which one is right or wrong. You're actually going to graph it and put your 5 points. And then based on your 5 points, it's going to draw in what it assumes you want as your one period. And you're going to figure out what your scale is, and you're going to adjust and all these different things. And so I didn't want the students to just try and figure that out. And so if you go here, I believe it's this one. So you're going to adjust, you're going to set your own scale for each of these things. You're going to go by ones, you're going to go by whatever it might be. I'm going to make something up, 2 pi, right? And so we're done with that. And then I can put a point of where I want it. So if I want my 5 points to literally go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's my scale. And then I'm going to start plotting points to make it. So just so the students were clear on how to go about doing this, I embedded a video into it. As basically you can just assign a YouTube video. And so I made my own video of here's how you do this, and put that in kind of right before they're doing those types of problems. And that's always an option, that it's very quick, very easy to do. But it's not a multiple choice thing. It's no, we're actually going to draw it. And the really cool one is when you see it for like you're graphing a polynomial. You're going to graph a polynomial. And so you're going to put down some x-intercepts, and it's going to, and a y-intercept or whatever, or you're going to graph rationals, and you're going to put in asymptotes, and you're going to put in verticals and horizontals and holes, and it's going to actually graph it, or you're going to actually put your finger or use your mouse, and you're actually going to draw it. And it's going to, like, you're doing stuff as if you're doing stuff on paper. Like that's what stands out over any other platform that I've used, that it is pretty impressive. So Delta Math has a crazy amount of stuff for the $95 that it costs per year, basically, of access for a teacher. So all this stuff is in here. Let's see, what else? Tests, when they go to a test, it has let me go to the edit on it, that it looks a little bit different because it's a test. So when you're creating it as a test, not as a homework. It's still assigned to the certain things. And then this is the date that it opens up. And then this is the date that it closes. And I can set up how much time. And then we all have accommodations that we have to adjust. And so to do that, all you have to do is any test, doesn't matter where, the very first test of the semester, click on manage time. And if somebody needs extra time, you just go to that person and click it and save. That's it. That's saved now for any test that happens throughout the whole semester. That is going to be adjusted, right? So that one's ready to go. And so then there's all sorts of other little settings that you can do associated with it. Here are what the quiz, the questions that it's related to. And then you have your due dates. Let's see, a little bit more is creating tests and stuff that's in there. That's for another day. One other big thing real quick is that, remember, that's that link that you're going to, once you create your class, you can copy that and paste it in somewhere and then send your students to that link. And then the cool kind of thing is that let's say this person forgot a password or screwed up their name or whatever it is. They don't have to create another account. I can actually adjust and be like, oh, you spelled your name wrong accidentally, whatever it is. I can kick them out, or I can put them in different classes. So I'm in all my classes, so I can make sure that everything looks like it's supposed to look. And then I can change a password. So if somebody messed up a password, I can do that as well. So there's kind of some cool administrative things that are simple that we have without having to go somewhere else and figure out how to change things. And then one other last little bit that I really like is, Delta Math is a company that's put stuff together. And so within that, they have help videos on stuff. And so, like, let's say we want to create our own problems. For me, it was invaluable to be able to create all this stuff and tests and quizzes and everything, that there's this video that walks you through. Here are all the different styles and different things. And if you want to create your own, like, it's impressive of what you can do. And so there's all sorts of videos and help me solve this types of things of how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And it's all there, which is fantastic. So, all right, that is the teacher side. The student side will be a lot quicker, but the teacher side is here's everything, right? It's all ready to go. There's nothing that would really need to be done other than each semester there's dates that have to be tweaked, but that happens no matter what. So that is our ACC's presentation for trig and pre-calc. Pre-calc would look exactly the same. We use the same platform, same notes. There's just an additional algebra unit at the end, but everything else is going to look exactly the same. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. And I'm going to make another video for the student side of it.